So, there was once a war named the Football War. The war was in between El Salvador and Honduras. These two Central American countries had tensions that were rising during the mid-1900s. El Salvador had less land than Honduras, but they had around the same population, around 2 to 3 million people. But in El Salvador, people couldn't find land to farm for themselves, so they started migrating to Honduras to find land to farm on. Hondurans didn't like this because they were losing out on land and jobs to the Salvadorians, so the government started mass deportations of the Salvadorians back to El Salvador. There were reports of refugees being mistreated during this time, and that added tension to the already tense situation that they were having. So with all that in mind, in June of 1969, El Salvador and Honduras were pitted against each other for qualifier matches for the 1970s World Cup in Mexico. So game one on June 8th, it was in Honduras' capital, and Honduras wins 1-0. But the Salvadorian team was harassed during this, and riots broke out after the game. Game two was on June 15th and held in El Salvador's capital. El Salvador wins the game 3-0, and they take this as their revenge match. This time the Honduras players were harassed, and there was another riot that broke out. Back in Honduras, the Salvadorians that were there were attacked, and their houses were burned, and all terrible manner of things were happening to them. Game 3 was on June 27th. It was in neutral ground in Mexico City. El Salvador won 3-2, but the same day, El Salvador cut diplomatic ties with Honduras. 2 weeks later, on July 14th, the war begins. El Salvador bombs Honduras airfields with World War II planes like the P-51 Mustang and the C-47 bombers. And they attack on two fronts, one heading to the Sula Valley and the other heading towards the capital. On July 15th, the Honduran Air Force attacks El Salvador's airport. They also attack oil facilities around the country, and El Salvador loses 20% of their fuel reserves because of this. On the 16th, the Salvadorian army secures Nuevo Ocotepeque, and we're planning to head to Santa Rosa de Copan, but the Hondurans airlifted troops to Santa Rosa and were able to hold them at Nuevo Ocotepeque. On the 17th, nothing really changed on the front, but in the air they were making strikes on each other's territory. Eventually, Honduras gained air superiority, and on the 18th, the ceasefire was announced, which required El Salvador to withdraw its troops, but they wouldn't withdraw until the safety of the Salvadorians there were guaranteed safety and reparations were paid to them. Only the first demand was met, and they began to withdraw the troops on August 2nd. So the football war wasn't even about football. It was about land and people who migrated safety.